Thank you very much, Ian. It's really a pleasure to be here. As you say, our organizations work really closely together. We share a lot more than 4 letters in our acronyms. It's this whole agenda of research integrity is of course, absolutely fundamental to the ability of research and innovation to deliver for all of us, which of course is what we are hoping it will do, and indeed demonstrably over the last year has done. This is the second time I've spoken at the UKRIO, the first time being in the context of a project I worked on many years ago for the Nuffield Council on Bioethics on research culture, bringing together a number of threads to construct a more kind of holistic understanding of the things that shape the way we do research. And I think that's still absolutely core to how we need to think about research integrity. And that's very much the way my talk will play out. And one of the reasons I'm so enthusiastic about UKRIO as an organization is that it really gets that. And I think that leadership in considering the whole system and the culture in the system as core to underpinning the high quality system we all want is crucial. So I have some slides which I will hopefully now share with you. As Ian says, I have for almost a year, believe it or not now, been the CEO of UK Research and Innovation. And for those of you, for example, from overseas who are unfamiliar with that, we are the largest public funder of research and innovation in the UK. We are about 3 years old now, and we have been formed from bringing together 7 disciplinary research councils that have existed for a long time in the UK, with Innovate UK, which is the UK's innovation agency, and Research England, which works very closely with similar bodies in the devolved nations to support the kind of core block funding and also knowledge exchange activities in higher education institutions. So what that means is we reach right across the disciplines and right across the sectors that conduct research and innovation. And it's through bringing together all of those elements that I think we have created an extraordinary opportunity to build for the UK a fantastic integrated, connected research and innovation system that can really deliver, hopefully, for everyone, with everyone, which is how I see research and innovation in the context of a high quality, inclusive 21st century knowledge economy. So as I say, we are a public body. We spend £8 billion of taxpayers' money every year, so we are naturally accountable to government. And crucially, I see us as a key node in a ecosystem, in a system working across all of those sectors and disciplines with the public sector, the private sector, the third sector, and crucially, of course, international partners, because research and innovation is very much an international endeavor. So that's who we are and why, of course, research integrity is fundamental to everything that we do. So as I mentioned, I got started really to think harder about this question of how we promote a really high quality research and innovation system with integrity at its core through many years of being a researcher, but also through a kind of rising tide of tensions in the system that were perceived as working against research integrity. And that was kind of crystallized through some time I spent serving on the Nuffield Council for Bioethics, where those concerns appeared over and over again across the work that we were doing, looking at new technologies and their implications in the kind of biomedical research area. And so we put together a project bringing together a whole range of actors who are interested in research and innovation to understand more what underpinned the the culture of research in the UK and indeed more broadly, and therefore what we needed to do to shift that culture into a place where some of these really important aspects, such as integrity, were front and center rather than a sort of add-on, which seemed to be how they were playing out at the time. And we conducted a very big survey, and from that, it's incredibly clear that people come into the research and innovation system with fantastic motives, and they are motivated by a desire to improve their knowledge and knowledge in general. They want to make discoveries for the benefit of society, and all of us are keen on kind of satisfying a insatiable curiosity, which is a very basic human emotion, in a way that allows us to understand the world around us and make it better. And there was very widespread agreement that what you needed to do that was to build a research and innovation system that was all about rigor and accuracy, and thinking about things differently, thinking new ideas, new ways of thinking about things, and honesty, obviously, and transparency. So high quality research was encapsulated by those characteristics. People were motivated by this range of desires, different people, different things was their primary motivation. And everybody agreed that underpinning all of that, there were a series of really key features of the research and innovation system that were necessary to deliver on those things. And those were collaboration, if you really want that originality and diversity and new ideas, working together with a whole range of different sorts of people are absolutely crucial. A really open culture where everything is shared, again, really important to driving forward understanding as quickly as possible, breaking down barriers, all kinds of multi and interdisciplinarity, and then creativity is absolutely crucial. So, and very few people would disagree with this list of features that a really high quality research and innovation system needs. And somehow or other, these things turn out to be hard to achieve in our system for a variety of reasons I will try and discuss at least. But one of the things that I think strikes me from looking at this list of things is how they play out in the concept, in the context of a concept that's been rising over the last few decades in kind of management studies and thinking about effective companies, and that is this concept of psychological safety. So all of these features that came completely independently out of conversations with the research community are quite deeply embedded in this concept of psychological safety. So what's that? It's been that there's good evidence from these kind of management business literature that if you want an environment that is creative and collaborative and open and all those kinds of things, it needs to be an environment in which people feel psychologically safe. And in order to do that, or the kind of characteristics of that environment are listed here. This is areas, an environment where people feel absolutely free to voice their ideas, even if they know people will disagree with them, and that disagreement will be viewed positively and constructively, and everybody will be able to engage in a constructive argument, a constructive disagreement. It's an environment where people seek and feel confident to provide really honest feedback, which is obviously a key part of this kind of constructive debate. Collaboration is absolutely crucial. Creativity, there's lots of evidence that a really creative, innovative environment is stimulated by collaborations between diverse people. You've got to be able to take risk without fear of failure. And you've got to be able to admit errors in this very constructive way. If you've made a mistake, you learn from it, and people are enthusiastic to hear about your mistake and understand then how they too can learn from that. And it's really important to be able to ask for help from other people. So this psychologically safe environment is demonstrably more productive and successful in a whole variety of contexts. It completely underpins all of those characteristics that are embedded or that match everybody's understanding of a really high quality research and innovation system. And I think a lot of the pressures in the system that we're currently working with work directly against this environment of psychological safety. Our psychological safety in the research and innovation system, in my view, is being constantly undermined by a lot of the cultural pressures that we currently have. Overall, this is because the concept, or the kind of core of the psychological safety concept, is the issue of personal threat. If you feel personally threatened, either because you know, your future career or your sense of yourself, or because you feel that you will be personally attacked if you do any of the things on this list, then that completely undermines this safety environment, and people will then withdraw and behave in a way that works against all of those key tenets for a high quality research and innovation system. So I think this framing is incredibly useful in the context of how we think about research and innovation, and the systems that we put in place to support high quality research and innovation. And again, emerging directly out of the Nuffield Council report, I think what we find is that the current systems are continually undermining that psychological safety for people working in the systems. So there is a perception of hyper competition, and indeed competition for funding, competition for jobs, all of those things is very high. And more importantly, the rules for winning that competition are disproportionately focused on a rather small number of measures that don't match people's aspirations, and indeed can incentivize poor research practice. And then also crucially, everybody feels that not only are those incentives not the ones that they think support the high quality system, but everybody feels that they're out of, they're not there, they have no agency to influence those rules. So it's all out of their control. So people feel in a position where they're being asked to deliver on a particular set of criteria that do not match their values, and where that their ability to deliver on those criteria and their ability to change those criteria to be better are out of their control. And that is a profoundly threatening situation, and therefore profoundly unhelpful for that psychological safety concept. We would like, as I said at the beginning, to be creative, rigorous, open, collaborative, interdisciplinary, all of those kinds of things. But we feel that we're being judged on particular kinds of research outputs, a very particular narrow set, all kinds of metrics that have been developed that don't map onto the list of things that we think we're trying to do. The competition for grant funding is very high, and having a grant is considered, you know, a wonderful thing, nothing to do with what you've done with it, or whether you've managed to deliver wonderful things for the research and innovation system or for the country. If you haven't got a grant, it somehow doesn't count. And that constant anxiety about the competition is quite deeply bedded in the system, and where, of course, we do assess outputs, the metricization of things, I think it is very difficult for individuals to deal with, even where those metrics might be quite useful at a systems or an organizational level. And that brings me to another really important point about this, because I think at the heart of a lot of this, deeply embedded in the culture and the concepts of how we think about research and innovation as a society, this isn't just about the research and innovation system, this is about where research and innovation sits in people's minds. It's about Einsteins. It's about these lone genius figures who beaver away in dusty libraries and research organizations and laboratories doing, arcane, difficult things. And our whole sense of self as researchers and innovators is based on the idea that we are some special, wonderful, boffin type creatures who are able to push forward the frontiers of knowledge alone and independently. And that individual contribution is considered the sort of zenith. People are endlessly asking, what was your contribution to this project? Where are you on the authorship list? Are you the principal investigator on this grant? And somehow that has become embedded in our idea about what being a researcher or an innovator is. And that creates this kind of constant imposter syndrome, which is also a deep psychological threat. When in reality, of course, the ability of the system to work at all is dependent on a huge number of people working collectively. And that's not just the people who label themselves as researchers and innovators, but all the people working around them, technicians, a much wider support infrastructure that is absolutely required for the system to work. And I said support there, and I actually don't think that's a good way to think about it, that there's researchers and support activities. There is a research and innovation system. All of these contributions to the system are absolutely essential for it to work, for it to do the things we want it to do. And yet somehow it's a particular sort of researcher. And in fact, the kind of principal investigator position, even the people are immediately around those principal investigators whose hands are on the test tubes, are undervalued in the way that we think about this system. And so that kind of lone genius focus, I think, amplifies up this sense of threat for people earlier in their careers. Making it to that position becomes the definition of success. For people in that position, maintaining your status as a lone genius, it becomes the kind of core element that underpins your sense of security. And that's a fundamentally insecure process. And you wind up then in a really difficult situation from the point of view of psychological safety. So the way that money and credit is allocated completely reinforces that lone genius idea. It's all about individuals. And those proxy measures that I talked about become accepted measures mapped onto the level of the individual. And we have too few measures, and that inherently, by definition, will crush diversity if you're only measuring a small number of things, and that compromises quality, as I've emphasized. And then our response to that tends to be to add additional proxy measures. Oh dear, we're not also valuing this, so let's add another thing that we will measure at the level of the individual, which just ramps up pressure. And then everybody is rushing around like crazy, trying to deliver a list of proxy measures that don't map onto what they're doing. And all of this is profoundly undermining to this concept of psychological safety, which totally compromises our ability for the system to work well. So I think there are a number of things we absolutely have to do and think about. We have to think about the criteria that we are using, and we have to think about how we organize it so that those criteria are not automatically mapped down onto individual researchers, which the current way we conceptualize the system fails adequately to do. Not only do we not think about the criteria widely enough, but also we have not managed to break that connection, asking the system to deliver on those criteria rather than the individuals. And what that also means, our focus on the individual means that whenever we come up with a problem, like there's a compromise to research integrity, the solutions which we initially reach for also focus disproportionately on the individual, because that's in our kind of mental model about how the system works. It's a bunch of lone geniuses doing stuff rather than a complex connected system that delivers as a whole on a whole range of priorities. So if you think about it, there are a set of things that we're constantly butting up against in the research innovation system that are not working. And those I would highlight are equality, diversity, inclusion. We do not have a wide enough range of people coming into the system feeling supported, feeling at home in the research and innovation system. This is a huge issue that we need to fix, because without that, we will fail to create the diversity that underpins creativity and novelty in the system, and we will exclude people whose skills and contributions we desperately need in the research innovation system. We have a huge amount of completely unacceptable behaviors in the system, lots of bullying and harassment in particular, which are totally destructive and utterly indicative of a system where psychological safety has failed. And then, of course, we have all of these rising issues that UKRIO is particularly concerned with research integrity. And in the context of our lone genius understanding of how research works, the solutions we tend to reach for to tackle these problems focus, at least initially, on the individual. For EDI, let's just get it's because individuals are biased, let's all do unconscious bias training. It's not that these things shouldn't happen or that they're wrong, it's just that they are not only insufficient, but also at some level reinforce a lot of the problems that we have. So for EDI, as I say, people reach for debiasing individuals. For bullying and harassment, there is a huge focus on how we respond to individual bullies and harassers. And not for a second do I want to take away from the need to do that and to do that well. It's really important that we have very high quality systems for tackling individuals who are bullies in our system. But much more importantly, we want to get to a situation where that behavior doesn't happen. The motives that people have for behaving in that way quite often emerge from the system, and the solutions and the protections that people around bullies have are compromised by our lack of a system that is psychologically safe. So again, focusing on bullies, focusing on individuals is, I think, undermining our ability to tackle the bullying and harassment problem. And similarly with research integrity, there's a lot of anxiety about individuals who compromise on research integrity, not enough thought about the system that underpins a set of behaviors which are clearly not why people or what people want to do when they come into the system. And as I said at the beginning, UKRIO is a fantastic example of an organization that is working to think much more holistically about how to support the research integrity that we all want to deliver. Reaching always for those individual focused solutions, whilst it's not that those solutions are wrong or shouldn't form part of how we are tackling these problems, when they are the sole focus, all they do at some level is add pressure on individuals. They almost normalize the concept that these behaviors will happen and they're bound to happen, and therefore we need systems to beat people up who do them. And that creates more threat in the system and less psychological safety, which completely undermines the wider culture that we need genuinely to stamp out all the negative behaviors that we see in the system. For example, the ability to speak up in all of these contexts is absolutely crucial. If we're working in a profoundly psychologically unsafe system, that is precisely one of the things that's inhibited. So to me, absolutely fundamental to all of this is to reconfigure the assessment system for research to reassert what we as researchers and innovators value. The assessment criteria define the things that we value. The criteria have to support all of those things. And all of those things are things that the system overall should be delivering. And it's that collective delivery that is important. All the criteria are important, but it is not the case that every person needs to meet all the criteria, but rather overall, as a community, all of those things need to be delivered. And so the kind of fundamental shift is away from thinking about the system as one where we have competition, sharp-elbowed competition between people on a narrow set of criteria, towards a situation where we support diversity with collaboration. Yes, the system will always be competitive, but we need to think about the system as a kind of portfolio of things. We need to fund and support the right balance of activity across that portfolio to build a system that is diverse, where the benefit of that diversity at multiple scales is captured through connectivity and collaboration. And all of that will do a much better job of supporting the high quality outputs that we want, and also a system that is psychologically safe for people to work in, where they feel that their diverse contributions are valued. So what does that look like? across a whole range of axes, we need to think about that diversity and the portfolio approach. So we have to fund different types of research projects, for example. Across the TRL levels, basic, applied, and so on, and different elements of the system. So generating data sets, inventing new technologies, versus pushing back the frontiers of knowledge, using those things to test key hypotheses. And then, of course, there's the out-of-the-box new stuff to explore, but none of that's any use at all unless you embed it in the system, test its reproducibility and generality. All of these things are absolutely crucial elements in the type of research that we do. And at the moment, we are asking all projects to do all things for all people, and we are, I think, disproportionately valuing elements of that, even in that complex mix. If we just focus on the researchers, then there again, I think we are not supporting the diversity that we need. We are not supporting people with different kinds of careers, and so we are not supporting people to bring their expertise into the research and innovation system after time spent in other careers. We're not connecting up the system properly by supporting people to move through it between the different sectors that conduct research, in and out in an appropriately weavy sort of way. And we are not supporting people to move sufficiently between disciplines, between approaches. And then, of course, people who've had career breaks for one reason or another versus people who haven't. We need to find ways that allow us to compare and build portfolios of different types of researchers in the research innovation system to support the diversity that we need. Different outputs are very important. Yes, publications are important, but they're only one thing. Data sets, patents, software, tools and resources, all of these kinds of things. And different contributions beyond just the research, the narrow research outputs are also very important, because for that high quality, engaged research and innovation system, people deeply embedded in the research system need to be interfacing to other key parts of that system. So they need to be training and mentoring the next generation of researchers through teaching and the people they support in the wider research innovation system. They need to be dedicating time to the key activities across the system that we need for high quality. So refereeing, organizing conferences, considering research integrity, governance, all of these kinds of things, and engaging much more widely with key stakeholders out in the general public, but also in policy, between businesses and academia, and so on and so forth. So all of these things need to be valued and supported. All of those things, all researchers need to be thinking about in the context of the portfolio of activities that they do. There's a huge diversity of things that you can do that support that range. So we're not talking about adding multiple new and different things onto people's list, but we do need much more robust ways to assess what people are doing and to value that much wider range of contributions. So one of the other things I've worked on that actually emerged rather indirectly. So as a result of the Nuffield report, a number of organizations have taken forward this culture agenda, of which the Royal Society is one. And as part of their research culture work, they produced a template CV, which is called the Résumé for researchers, that includes this is a short format template. It's essentially 2 pages with 4 boxes and narrative opportunities for people to describe their contributions to knowledge, which is where maybe a lot of the classical things that we think about would go, but also same size box, supporting the people in the research and innovation system, and then contributing to the wider research and innovation community and engaging with a wider set of stakeholders. So mapping onto those things where diversity is absolutely crucial, and different ways of achieving all of those things are possible. And this narrative form of the CV with utter flexibility allows people to showcase how they've contributed in different ways. And I think that's really important. And so to move beyond the individual, we need to think about how we build those portfolios allow individuals to demonstrate their contributions, but that those contributions collectively form a robust and resilient research and innovation system, and the diversity of those contributions is valued. So yes, support for individuals, their training and the institutional governance around these key issues is really important, but we need a culture of diversity with collaboration, and that is much more empowering for individuals and much more powerful in the system as a whole in delivering what we need to do. And at the same time, it deeply supports this concept of psychological safety because it encourages difference. And that's fundamental to allowing people to bring to the system who they are in an honest, open way, in a way that they feel that their individual differences will be valued. Whereas at the moment, individual differences are being crushed by a system that focuses on too few things. So if we want this culture of collaboration, openness, multidisciplinarity, and creativity, we've got to think about it in the context of psychological safety and build assessment systems that support that safety rather than undermine it. And I will stop there, and I'm really keen to hear questions and comments as we go forward. Thank you.
Ottoline, thank you so much. That was fascinating, and it's very interesting to hear your thoughts, both personal and those on behalf of UK Research and Innovation. It was also nice to see the Nuffield Council report reference as well, because I think that really was a game changer. Got a lot of people in bioethics and elsewhere thinking about research culture issues in a way that hadn't happened before. We've had a lot of questions and comments in the chat, and you'll be pleased to know the most recent message in the chat is enthusiastic applause, so thank you very much for that. And we'll now move on to some questions and discussion before we go to our next set of sessions at about 11. So we've got about 15 minutes to have a good conversation. Okay, pardon me, let's look at some questions. Jack Grove asks, does the current drive to cut red tape in research make it hard to announce any extra measures to improve research culture? Are new requirements placed on, and also because if you place new requirements on researchers to make sure results are replicable, he gives an example, that can be seen as adding to the admin burden. So how do you sort of square competing policy priorities of improving culture and integrity, but also reducing red tape?
Yes, so I think the fact that this is perceived as attention is exactly an illustration of why the current way we think about fixing problems is a problem itself. So a lot of what we've done over the years that has dug us into this hole, in my view, is where a problem has arisen, we've thought, oh, we need a system to stop people doing this bad behavior. We will introduce a kind of compliance mechanism. They will have to demonstrate that they are not doing this bad behavior and they are doing the good behavior, and that will fix the system. And that creates exactly this problem where it actually adds pressure on people and adds time burden, that bureaucracy concern, and it creates a culture that doesn't sufficiently support collective responsibility and accountability that is absolutely needed to deliver the system that we want, and also to support psychological safety. So I actually don't think that there is inherently a conflict between the things that we're talking about in the system. It's a question of how we build the right governance systems such that it's clear what people need to do if they come up with a problem, but there isn't an assumption that it's down to individuals to demonstrate that they are not causing the problem. So it's a question of getting the accountability and the responsibility right. It needs to be shared across the system with governance arrangements that allow that provide real clarity and transparency on what you do if you see a problem. But that's a system-wide function where individuals need to take to buy into that collective responsibility. It's quite hard to explain. Fundamentally, it's about trust versus compliance. And it's an Honora O'Neill. I would recommend everybody goes away and reads the Reith lectures and understands how you build that trust through high quality governance with collective responsibility, not through compliance with individual responsibility.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to mute as an air ambulance hovering near a nearby hospital. Okay, that was fantastic. Thank you. Ricky Hetherington asks, in terms of a grant application, what would they need to look like in order to take into account the wider wider contributions that researchers and academics are making?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting question in a whole variety of ways. One of the things I'm really keen that we do at Research Innovation and collectively as a community is to think about the pounds that we invest. So when I invest £1 in research innovation, I am investing simultaneously in a lot of different things. Yes, I'm investing in a particular research project, but I am also investing in the development of the careers of the individuals who are funded on a grant, and I'm investing in the position of that project in the research and innovation system more widely. So thinking about investing in a project just as what science or arts and humanities or whatever will get done is not enough. We have to think about how that project will support the careers of the people working on it and how that project will interface with these much wider range of stakeholders and how that project will support the integrity, for example, of the research and innovation system. So I think all of those things highlighted on the resume for researchers are core questions I need to ask when I'm investing £1. What we think it will look like, we are rolling out at UKRI that resume as the standard CV for all our grant applications. It'll take a while to roll through. And of course, we'll be looking for feedback on how easy it is to use and on how easy it is for committees to use it well. And it's a change, it's a big change away from counting people's publications and previous grants. So it'll take some time to embed it, but asking all of those 4 questions of all our applicants, I think is crucial, and genuinely feeding that into the way that we allocate funding is crucial. Moving beyond that, I'm very interested in why it is, for example, that currently all our grants have 1 PI. They have to have 1 PI. There doesn't seem to me to be inherently a reason why that's the case. And we are certainly going to be looking in our program or considering simpler and better funding, how we can build a funding system that genuinely supports all of those things that we want to support and emphasizes the outputs from the system and that portfolio of activities that's needed over and above one individual delivering on all of them and having all of the kind of both the pressure and the glory associated with just them. So there's a whole range of things we can do, and it will take time because it's culture change, and it will take many people shifting the way they think about things. But that's also the positive, because it means everybody is empowered to do something. And I think that's quite exciting if we can bring everybody behind this mission. It's a collective endeavor which will build that sense of collective responsibility.
Thank you, that's fascinating. I take your point that we all have a role to play, whether we're CEO of a charity, CEO of a huge funding organisation, or a researcher in the field. Thank you. I had a few questions in relation to the REF. Saying that the REF, can be a driver for problems of metricisation, the lone researcher model and the like. There, REF impact equality assessments can be learning points, and obviously there's a REF review coming up. So any thoughts on, is the REF part of the problem, part of the solution? Can it be changed? And, we've had a lot of questions on that, so I think your views will be very well received.
Absolutely. I think the REF is both part of the problem and part of the solution. So I think assessment is essential. We need a continual feed of information to understand whether the money we're investing is delivering the things that we want. And we need to be therefore clear about the things that we want, and recognize that the things that we measure will feed back to drive the system. And the REF is a key measuring point. And the really important thing about the REF is it's a really underpinning component of the UK's dual support system, which is a really unique element in how we deliver a high quality research and innovation system in general, and in the context of the HEI sector in particular. So UK research innovation, just in, I mean, our budget, it's £8 billion a year. It's a lot of money. The part that most researchers look at is the response mode funding system. That response mode funding system, if you go with purely fully open response mode, it's 10% of our budget. It's actually not a huge proportion of our budget. There's another bit of it that that is more targeted response mode to boost particular areas. Even if you add that in, the total amount of money we invest through response mode funding is less than the amount that comes in through QR to universities. So that dual support system with a block grant into the university plus the competitive funding model in response mode are crucial elements in building the system that we want and in providing the diversity and flexibility that we need. Targeting that QR money in an effective way and giving universities the flexibility to invest it in the way that they see fit is important. One of the really important things that currently drives the way the system works are the things that the REF measures, but actually they're not that nuts. It's the way they're interpreted that it causes a lot of the problems. But crucially, it's still very heavily dependent on individual PIs. That's the volume measure. So how much money you get depends on how many of those people you have on your list. And although there was a move in this, following the Stern review, to break the link between those individuals and the outputs, so to allow that much more portfolio-based assessment that I think is so important, it failed because we were unable to come up with a way of measuring the volume in a university that was different from those individuals. And I think the fact that we find it so difficult to do that demonstrates how deeply embedded in our thinking that individual principal investigator is in the way we think research and innovation happens. We need to find much more holistic measurements for research volume that allow us properly to break that link. And then we will be in a much better position to support the diversity of contributions that I think we need to support.
Thank you. We've got a few more minutes. I think we can fit in maybe two more questions. Firstly, from a couple of people, obviously we're talking about kind of long-term cultural change, but are there any kind of practical quick wins that UKRI is going to focus on in the immediate term? And equally, what can sort of other funders and indeed research organisations do kind of quickly to get things started?
So I think the Résumé for researchers, which we're rolling out as quickly as we can, is an important contribution. And then I think that everybody, we, the community in general, need to give ourselves just a little bit of extra time every time we think to zoom out. There's always this, the way we currently conceptualize the system is so deeply embedded in who we are and what we do, that the solutions we individually reach for and the people whom we currently think hold all the power, you wind up with the wrong kind of solutions. I think that they tend to focus hugely on money, for example, and money is important, but we can do a lot to shift a culture without changing anything about the current situation with the money. So one of the things I often highlight in this is everybody, every individual person in the system can do this one thing. If you meet a colleague, I usually say in the bike shed in the evening when you're going home, and you say, did you have a good day? And they say, yes, I had a great day. My paper was accepted. What pops into your head first? And 99% of people now, the first question they ask, it just comes straight out of their mouth, is that's great, what journal? Why is that a relevant question? why, as a researcher and an innovator, is that a relevant question? Why are you not immediately asking, that's fantastic, what's it about? It's that, I think, if we can, all of us, ask what's it about, not only will that recenter the system on what we're actually interested in doing, but also it will rewire our brains to think more heavily about what we're really daily trying to achieve. And therefore, the way we individually implement the assessment tools we have available to us will refocus on the things that really matter to us.
Thank you. We've had a few questions about sort of bullying and harassment, which obviously is a serious issue in all activities of human society, but has been highlighted in the research community a lot in recent years and heightened by the pandemic. What are your thoughts on what we can do about that, and is there anything that UKRIO is doing or has planned in particular?
Yes, this is a hugely important issue. It's just unacceptable that bullying and harassing behaviours are so endemic in the system. And I think it is deeply underpinned by all of the problems that I've been talking about. So in my experience dealing with cases over the years, the way we conceptualize it is very individual, blame-based. And although absolutely people engaging in those behaviours need to be held to account, when it's got that far, already things have gone horribly wrong. People early on have been unable to call out what's going on. And we're also then asking people in vulnerable positions to step forward and increase their vulnerability by being accusatory. And in my experience, often what's gone on is a really difficult amplification of a breakdown in the relationship. And the bullied person does not want to shop their supervisor, for example. There are obviously other bullying relationships, but that's a very common one. They don't want to shop them into a blame system. They recognize that their supervisor is themselves in a difficult position and maybe has quite positive motives, but their behavior is nonetheless totally unacceptable, and the supervisor is dumping their anxiety on them. And so everybody, that person is then placed in essentially an impossible position. And what we need is, right from the beginning, there to be a much easier way for people to call out in a much less threatening way that they are finding a particular behavior uncomfortable, for example. And focusing on that, those elements, bystander training, psychologically safe environments where people can say things like that without feeling themselves threatened, that in the long run is going to be much more positive in supporting everybody in the system, both the people who are currently bullied and the people who find themselves, whose behaviours, I suppose, are amplified through the system into that very negative space. I don't want to excuse those people, and there are people in the system who are really behaving dreadfully and in a way that is extraordinary, that there are these kind of zones where people have long-term bullying behaviours that everybody knows about and nothing's happening about it, and that is terrifying and needs to stop. But at the same time, many people are finding themselves many people behave in ways they don't even realize is creating the problems that it's creating. And we need to help those people also out of that cycle by allowing it to be identified far before it gets to that point. So I think it's a really good example where our focus currently on accusatory solutions doesn't help anybody as much as it should. Yes, we need ways to stop the really appalling behavior with high quality governance and reporting, but hopefully things should very rarely get to that point. And that to me is crucial. And what we are doing, we've just established a forum where we can begin to discuss across the community those much broader systems level approaches that we need to stop these behaviors well beyond the slap a governance arrangement with the punitive approaches on top, which is the kind of reach to solution that we tend to look at the moment.
Thank you. I certainly agree that there's a need for cultural change as well. I'm reminded of the Wellcome Trust survey from last year, which had a very high percentage of managers saying that they thought they were great managers, and a very high percentage of the people who were managed saying that the managers weren't great at all. One final question before we let you go. Julie Harris asks, are UKRI considering how the balance or lack of between sort of research time and time for other duties impacts on issues of research integrity and research culture? You know, if people have to spend a lot of time doing teaching, admin, etc., their ability to either initiate or engage with initiatives to improve research practice can be quite limited.
So I think this is another interesting indicator of where things have gone wrong, in that people say, oh no, I haven't got time for these other things because I you know, obviously I need all of this time to do these things. If that wider range of things were properly valued and supported, then people wouldn't be saying, I haven't got enough time to do this thing. They would be saying, here's my portfolio, all of these things are valued and again to contribute both to creating collectively this high quality system and therefore to supporting my feeling that I'm valued in that system, my career, if you want to look at it that way, and things will be fine. At the moment, we feel those things are in tension with one another because we are overvaluing one particular set of activities and undervaluing other activities. And if that means that the classic measures of productivity in the research end go down, I don't think that's a problem, because actually I think productivity in the research sense will go up because we will be valuing the things that we need to underpin the really high quality research. So the fact that we see those things as a tension at the moment is a symptom, not a cause.
Thank you so much. It was a fascinating talk and a fascinating discussion session. We had a lot more questions than we had time to answer, so my apologies to those who didn't get their questions answered, but we will look into how we can respond to those in different ways. Ottoline, thank you so much for opening the conference today. You had lots of wonderful feedback in the chat already. So we will bid you farewell, but thank you for making a great start to this conference.
Thank you.
Great.